All right. So joining us from the Oregon coast is Will and Ryan. Will and Ryan are both HeatSync Labs alumni with a fascination for open source technology and alternate methods of counting time. I don't know about this alternate methods for counting time stuff. I literally am going on a shopping trip to win a Rolex, and that's probably not going to happen. But if y'all think I should be radicalized against time, I'm open to it. All right, so we're gonna flip the camera over here. I'm gonna have our audio on mute until it's time for Q&A. And I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Wave at us if the audio ever messes up. So basically, you all probably think that you know about time. I sure did until I heard my good friend Prescott talk about 10 years ago. And, in that original presentation, he produced an alternate way of conceiving of time. And so we've kind of taken over that mantle. But first, we're going to go back linearly in actual history. You know, back thousands of years ago, we would conceive of time as being something based on natural observable phenomena, the position of planets, the position of the sun. Maybe it's springtime, maybe it's time to harvest. And so we had a very kind of human scale, natural scale conception of time. Uh, and we see that even today in things like micro seasons or whatever, where we notice that it's time for the birds to migrate or something like that. And when you get a little bit further into actual rigid timekeeping, obviously we'd have water clocks and sundials and that kind of stuff that would give you a good metric of timekeeping. You'd have astrologers and scientists looking out there to be able to predict natural phenomena and measure the passage of time. And you get something like this ancient Roman sundial where you get a conception that maybe you're halfway through the solar day, maybe it's time for lunch or something like that. But when I was investigating, like what would an ancient Roman conception of a second be, or even a minute? You can say that we're conceiving of hours because we're dividing up that day, but how do hours work when the sun isn't visible and stuff like that? And so what you really end up going into is uh, this kind of approximation of going through the day, and so we kind of got interested in that in the terms of like how do you bring ancient Roman sundial into the modern, like, hey, you want to buy a sundial and it's like on your watch or something. Like, how would we conceive of that in the modern digital era? And so I worked with a couple of friends to make a Roman time website, and the URLs there. And so that's kind of like based off your location on the globe and the anticipated sunrise and sunset. Where are you? And we can measure that pretty precisely if we want. Um, but as you get into the advance of technology, you really only start to see real precise subdivisions for average people when you're trying to coordinate train schedules, the invention of the locomotive, trying to catch a train on time, trying to make sure that those trains go at a certain speed and don't hit each other when they're crossing and stuff like that. So we really only get down to minutes and seconds and caring about it across hundreds of miles when we have the locomotive and industrial technology and capitalism and all these wonderful things. And we also have some great moments like in the French Revolution and later with Swatch Internet Time, where we're trying to be very scientific and use decimals and divide the day up according to a metric kind of a system. And so, in a good nod to David's CFP here, we did have the Swatch attempt to divide the day into 1,000 units. And I mean, that was kind of fun, but if you're in a different time zone, or it just really wasn't very very practical. um so let's see here. Yeah, we got.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's kind of on one side of the kind of abstractions, like the spectrum of abstraction here. We've got Roman time on one side where it's like, yeah, it's just kind of wherever the shadow falls, to kind of the exact opposite at the turn of the new millennium here, where we know that the day is divided into 1,000 equal segments, and every segment is exactly, what was it, 86.4 seconds? I've already forgot. It's out of my memory. It doesn't matter. Um, and so right around the time, about a decade ago, again at Heatsink Labs, hanging out with Will, hanging out with David, hanging out with Prescott, I was introduced to this Tokyo Flash blog, which was kind of like a weird Japanese watch brand. Again, kind of looking like the, they were designing watches that they thought would look futuristic in 2010. And so they built some watches. I was hoping to show some demos of some of, well, camera's gonna struggle with me. Watches are dead. It turns out a 10-year-old LCD watch, even when you put a new battery in it, it doesn't work. That's a different conversation about time. But they had just like some incredible like thinking about like the nature of time itself, right? And so like a lot of their designs were based around sort of creating these kind of, I'm going to mute this, these different views of representing time, right? And so they sell this watch, for example, that's rather than being hands on a watch face, they're these rotating drums that are all collinear, right? And so they have stuff like this, like interesting mechanical watches. Yep, there's the Hack the Planet. Hit the wrong alt tab. Or this one, which is the watch that I was going to show you that doesn't work. And they built a lot of like very strange, like abstract watch faces like this, where you look at it and you say, this is complete nonsense. This doesn't represent anything that I would consider time. But basically you can learn how to read this, where at the end of the day, it's kind of just, it is an analog clock, right? We can see, well, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's like 4:20 on this watch, right? Where kind of this outside ring counts hours. There's like a smaller ring inside that counts minutes. And so they did a lot of stuff like that. And they also had a lot of like kind of crazy ideas on the design blog about what watches could look like, right? And so, what if you wanted your watch to look like the nacelles of the Enterprise D, right? Where like the hour hands are on the ring of the starship, and then the nacelles have the minutes on them, right? You can look at your watch, you know what hour it is. You can kind of squint at those awful nacelles and know what minute it is. It's fun, it's interesting, it's cute. Why don't we have anything like this? Why don't we have anything like this crazy analog watch that basically has two semi-transparent rings that visually interfere with each other and create this Moore effect, right? And so we can see from this one, for example, we can see that there's like a kind of locus of interference here at 236. There's all these sorts of interesting ideas on this blog. There's all sorts of like absolutely insanely bad ideas. But then I think we get to kind of the crux of the problem, the crux of why I think timekeeping has kind of stalled out. And it comes down to this, right? In 2012, we were already thinking about how to cram a whole freaking Android phone onto our wrist. And that's kind of the best we did, right? Like we, rather than thinking about interesting ways to tell time or integrate kind of the flow of life into the flow of our digital life into our physical life, the best we could come up with was, hey, it sure would be nice if I could tweet and have like video calls on my wrist, right? That's futuristic. This blog stopped getting updates in 2015, interestingly, right around the time that the Apple Watch started taking off, right around the time that like Pebble started to become a thing. I feel like we kind of gave up on having interesting ideas around time, or so I thought, right? And so we get to this point where we're kind of asking ourselves these questions of like, why do we still have these things, right? Just like here, I'm gonna open up my video real quick. Just like a quick show of hands, how many of you own like an Apple Watch? Yeah, fewer than I thought. Okay, so we got one person who knows what time it is, and the rest of us, we're just living free, right? But like, I found myself asking, like, why do we still have these wristwatches? What is the purpose of knowing exactly what the minute is? Um, and a lot of it comes down to not caring exactly what the minute is, right? You want to know when your next event is. You want to know when, kind of the next like broad season is. You want to know when your vacation is. You want to know how much time is left on your workday. Um, and our technology doesn't give us the ability to do any of this, right? The last I checked, the only thing you can do with an Apple Watch is change the wallpaper on it and change it from digital to analog. I'd love to be wrong on that, but I think that's the case. I have a crappy open source watch, which we're about to tell you about. So I don't have a horse in that game, but I think it's kind of an affront, right? Like, I'm a weird Linux person. I have this crazy desktop setup here that we're not going to get into talking about. It's kind of a miracle that this whole setup's working and the audio worked on the first try. But that's kind of where we're at, right? That's where Will and I are at, especially. We're both kind of weird, goofy open source guys. And so we started, re-exploring this question over the last couple of years. And so we started asking, why are watches so boring? Right? Like I said, if you own a watch, it's probably an Apple Watch. If you own Leica, it's probably a Garmin. That's just the way things go. But this is the best that we have, right? This kind of, maybe you've put a custom band on it. Maybe you've attached some ugly gibbets into the little holes on the thing. I think this is beautiful. I also think it's like an absolute travesty, right? What can we do to take time back to ourselves? And at this point, I would throw to David here. We can add some cultural criticism from David at the end, hopefully, give you some time to think about it. But why did we get here, and what can we do about it? So back in 2014, before the Apple Watch, before the Galaxy Watch, before all of this stuff, there was the Pebble, right? You might remember the Pebble. You might own a Pebble. You might have a Pebble in reach that doesn't have a working battery that you were hoping to be able to demo. But a lot of us aren't giving up, which leads us to kind of an interesting question of like, what can we do about this, right? The Pebble had a battery usually measured in weeks. It had like a nice ecosystem of custom watch faces that weren't just slap a wallpaper on it and put an analog clock over that. They were doing interesting things. There were a lot of clones of kind of the more interesting Tokyo Flash watch faces available for Pebble. And for a long time, I used that. I used it until this thing came around, and we'll get to what this thing is next. I think. No, got to do a little bit more, right? Sorry. I wrote these slides and I don't even know the order of them. So we're right. So the Pebble gets bought by Fitbit in, I want to say 2016. Subsequently get bought by Google. And as we all know, Google's very good at shipping products. And that's why you can still buy a Pebble today. You can't buy a Pebble today. The closest you can get maybe is like buying kind of open source wearables. The sort of there's these interesting digital watch hats built around like these Casio watches that are a little less terrible than what's on display here. There's this, for example, which is called the sensor watch. And basically what you do when you get one of these is you open up your watch, you throw out the little board that was in it, or you take out the little board that was in it and you throw that out. And you put this board in it. It attaches to the LCD that's already on the Casio. It fits into the shell very nicely. You seal it back up and it's waterproof, and it gives your phone gives your watch all sorts of new little powers, like the ability to tell time temporally based on the length of the day as opposed to the length of the hour. It gives you the ability to hook arbitrary sensors up to it. So you could say, maybe something attached to like the light level, things like that, where you can build kind of interesting open source applications that run on your wrist, that last forever, that run a long time. There's a similar option called I can't scroll this, of course I can't. There's a thing called the Good Watch as well, which for us radio heads, for us calculator freaks, this board is like a similar idea, but it has a radio built in. And so you can use it to, for example, open up your garage door if you have a garage door that's not cursed, or if you don't live in New York City. I don't know what to tell you, New York City people. And so there's all these ideas, right, of like kind of not reclaiming the technology, or there's not this like underlying ideology behind these things, but they give us tools to build interesting technology. And I think that's where Will and I come in. That's where kind of we get fired up, because about I guess that was for my birthday, right? It's been about a year. About a year ago, Will and I started hacking on these open source watches called the Pine Time. And so these guys, they're $30. They're open source. They're sealed. They're waterproof. They work with open source software. They can run on Android. I'm about 70% sure they work on an iPhone. Probably. And there's also, we're not going to get too much into it, but I want to mention it because we're going to talk about some of the watch faces. But there's another open source watch called the Watchy, which I guess if we wanted to put like a fine point on it, and maybe people in the room will understand it, maybe they won't. The Pine Time is an open source smartwatch, and the Watchy is a free software smartwatch, if that makes sense, right? Like kind of different ideologies, where one is much more, you're going to 3D print your own case and it's going to be super personalized and it's, very liberatory tech. And then Pine Time is like, hey, we're like this like crazy Korean company who has this like really cool like supply chain thing. And we specialize in building like Linux and ARM devices. Here's a cool Linux and ARM device. Please build cool stuff with it. We chose to build cool stuff with the Pine Time because again, waterproof, $30, open source, open hardware, good stuff.
Touchscreen, full color.
Touchscreen, yes, it's got an LCD. And so that's kind of the basis of our current development is this Pine Time. And so now, having laid that groundwork, we're going to step back from not all the way back to 2000 BC, but close to the year 2014, when we were all young and impressionable and in our 30s, I guess, for David.
You want to load it up?
Yeah. So we're going to start with a little video from 2014 that I badly chopped and screwed to make it work. But this is kind of a condensed version of the original hackathon presentation that Prescott and his crew built for the original Fuck Time wearable. And then we'll start talking about how we went about fucking time. You're mute. No, unmute.
It's an unwatch. This is Fuck Time. It's an unwatch. You can see right here. Can you read the words on the close-up? Whatever. You can reset it for me. We can see how it works. So human beings have experienced time before the development of accurate timekeeping devices. And they did this not with numbers of hours and minutes, but with the events, whether physical, agricultural, or social, that sort of punctuated their lives. We didn't really start to care about a daily routine in hours and minutes until locomotives and factory shifts needed to be synchronized. So what Marxist scholars call time discipline, where we get up at a certain number of hours and minutes, and we go to bed, and we have this routine, again, in hours and minutes rather than in events, is it's an invention of industrial capitalism to control human behavior. And you can hear that in the words we use to describe time. You're wasting time, you're spending time, time is money. Well, fuck time. So fuck time is an effort to liberate users from the oppression of time discipline. And it does that by telling time, not in terms of a number of hours and minutes, but in terms of your schedule. So that's demo time, and you can see it sort of moving across. There's a little sort of relative indicator, again, not a number of minutes or seconds or anything silly like that, but a relative, how far am I through this event? Is that demo time or is that work time?
I think they get the idea.
Yes, so work time progresses rather slowly. You can't really see that moving naturally. But time is also flexible. It's not the same thing every day. It's based on your calendar or the will of the people, this stuff. So what we have here, can we get the screen? Send messages via Skynet?
Let me talk about that.
All right. So that's a good. So the question is, how would two people arrange a meeting in subjective time? And that's an open problem. So that's something that you, as an individual and as a community, can figure out, right? So if you have a system that knows, Google really knows your calendar, you just signal to whatever your calendar that you want to arrange a meeting with this person, and the computers can really do that kind of time negotiation for you. Why do I have to care about that? Google knows where I need to be when, and where the other person needs to be when, and they should figure it out based on, I don't know, moods and times of day and when or whether we're busy and the will of the people. And
what's the subjective time delay between data transmission?
The subjective time delay?
Are you back?
We are back.
All right. So yeah, taking on that inspiration, we basically thought, what would that look like now? I've got my version of my open source watch here, and I think that that's pretty fun. But if we really go back to that original inspiration, what would that look like? And this button, yeah. So yeah,
I put that in the wrong place. Yeah, so we're just here to ask a very simple question, right? Is the art of terrible timekeeping dead? This person asked 4 years ago whether there were any Tokyo Flash watch faces for the Galaxy Watch, and I still can't find any today. I went looking for a little bit. So with respect to Ian Betteridge and Betteridge's Law, is the art of terrible timekeeping dead? We say no, and we're here to present some new developments in the art of terrible timekeeping. Here's one that I thought was interesting when I was out running some errands, trying to get a battery for this thing. I went into a watch shop and found this 18th century lamp clock, which kind of worked similar to Will mentioned water clocks earlier on. You fill it up with oil, the wick is going to burn, it's going to chew up the oil, and based on the burn rate of that oil, we can measure time. And that's accurate, as it says, to within 40 minutes a day. I think we can do a little bit better than that. Not significantly better, but a little bit better.
All right. So like I was saying earlier, we had that sundial on your wrist kind of inspiration. And I set out to make that just kind of fun, with friends. And so we run into kind of conceptions like if you have 12 hours between sunrise and sunset, does that mean that the first and last hour are half hours? Is there a center hour, or how are you going to decide what noon is? And all of these fun things. I personally decided that my sundial was on the south side of a building in the northern hemisphere, so my clockwise is actually opposite from the normal clockwise, going from left to down and then right again. And so it's just different fun ways of conceiving of what we would call these different hours throughout the day. We've got some sources there. We can surely hook you up with those as well. If anybody's interested in reproducing these for their Watchy or their Pine Time. And so one of the things that Ryan and I got into is there's some old Japanese timekeeping methods, not only like a water clock and not only like religious, bell throughout the day, like the city bell or the temple bell chimes, but also, in I think like the 1890s.
It was like Edo era before that.
Yeah.
So 18th century, let's call it.
Yeah. So they would import these mechanical clocks from the Dutch and have a 24-hour rotation, but they would actually swap out the watch faces for the different seasons, and they would call it, through those different seasons, they would still say that there's 6 hours in the day. Yeah, so we've got this great. This is a dynamic, adjustable one, but you could imagine that there's different faces for each season, and just as we're experiencing with daylight savings time in winter, you have a longer or shorter hour of sunlight throughout the day, and that would actually be reflected in their actual hours, so that there would be a varying number of seconds in a Japanese Wadoke hour. So that was a real interesting inspiration. And so we made some variations on that. That's okay.
Yeah.
Here, Maybe.
Yeah, good luck.
Yep. No. Okay. So that's a digital.
Worked for a second there.
That's a digital version of that we've been working on our wrist here. And there's plenty of other options here, like, where are you in terms of the sunset and sunrise on the planet? And maybe you have a little clock in the corner that says what the civil time is in your area. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're reproducing some of those old faces from the Tokyo blog. So there's plenty of different interesting things that you can do here, especially with time zones and stuff like that. We've also got the fuzzy time.
Yeah, and this is kind of in that same vein, and this is actually built into my open source Linux desktop of choice. If you've noticed down here, it says it's 4:30, which is telling me we got to start wrapping it up here. But KDE has this built in where rather than knowing, who needs to know that it's exactly 6:28 or 7:28 for you, excuse me, sorry. Doing math in my head, it's not good, don't do it. Not super important, right? We're going to try and not run up on time here. But the cool thing about the KDE one is its fuzziness is adjustable, right? And so by default, it'll show you 5 minutes accuracy, but you can kind of adjust it towards more and more fuzziness. And so on my desktop, I actually have kind of all of the different fuzzinesses up here at the top. You can see where I know it's 4:30. I know it's time for afternoon tea, even though Will and I had that before we joined the call. I'm not going to really call this afternoon, but my computer does. And it's certainly the weekend for a little bit more. But those sorts of like different time scales of like working in different abstractions of like, oh, it's, like Will said, it's kind of, we're getting into the early winter, we're in late fall. Like, how do you contextualize the space between those two things as opposed to saying, oh, it's fall, everything's autumnal and we got to wear our warm sweaters and it's all like brown and, all these like earth tones. Now we're in winter and it's a different, like there's room for more fuzziness in it ultimately, right? And that's kind of where we're getting to, right? And so for when I first got my Pine Time, this was the first watch face I made on it. Another one of those classic Pebble watch faces where it's just like, we kind of figured this one out years ago. When I had a Pebble, it would tell me it's 4:25. Why can't my open source watch do that? And it was, it's very easy to teach your weird open source watch new timekeeping tricks, and more people should do that, I think. And so kind of wrapping it up here, here's kind of what Will and I think the sort of ideas of fuck time could look like in one of these like modern ARM-based LCD watches.
Does this one load up the actual demo? Or this one? Okay, so the idea here, and this is running
on there. Sorry, no, that wasn't you. That was me.
Wrong one.
Yeah.
So there's we've got an actual simulator here of one of these watches that's on our wrists, and there's a small screen and a big screen here. Yeah, there we go. So as we're going through the day, we might have, like Prescott was saying in that other video, we might have a calendar time where we've decided for ourselves what our day looks like. Maybe we're presenting right now. Maybe we're going to hang out with David later. Maybe we're going to catch the train later. Our watch could just tell us that. We don't know what time it is. We just know it's time to wrap this presentation up and then go catch the train, right? And our watch could let us know that without getting into numbers and seconds and this kind of industrial capitalist time. And then as we go down, we can have bigger and bigger time scales of, maybe the thing to be paying attention to at this moment is we need to make sure that we go home and we get the leaves off the ground so our grass doesn't die. Maybe we've only got a couple hours of daylight left. Maybe we need to enjoy that before it gets taken from us. That's not reflected in it being 4:30 or 7:30 or whatever numbers we assign. They're made up anyway with the civil time of daylight savings and the different kind of capitalist government imposed numbers that come onto this. And so with this conception, we go into bigger and bigger time scales, kind of going into like the original Blackfoot hierarchy of needs. Not only do we have what's immediately time-based and focused right now, but there's personal goals and civilizational goals and long-term goals where maybe it is time to eat lunch, but maybe you fit in 5 minutes of one of these other things in between and among these larger time scales. It's, maybe it's not time to eat lunch, maybe it's time to read a book or do some kind of winter thing. So that's our conception there. And we're going to be developing more on this as an actual watch firmware and watch face to kind of reimagine what a time scale could be without paying attention to what the government says the time might actually be. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
If we have any questions or throwing it back to David.
Thanks, Will and Ryan. It's a very interesting talk. I don't really have any like cultural commentary to add to it necessarily yet. I mean, I don't know if I'm also the audience. Like I'm literally wearing like speaking of like Casio nerd watches, like this is the calculator watch. I'm like, well, it's not the original one that I had in 1997 because they like wore down the buttons on it. I was doing a lot of math. Um, basically, yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's also compelling to think that this was something that like y'all and Prescott basically came up with, like, I think years before people started really, like, at least in my circle, started talking about the social commentary of timekeeping. Jenny Odell, of course, published a few kind of like important books on the subject. More
I spent a lot of
recently,
time trying to fit in some Jenny for you, and I failed. I ran out of time.
oh,
Sorry.
that's fine. Um, yeah, our one of our next sessions was a little bit away, so we have a little bit of wiggle room. But we do have a question from the audience. Ruthie, go ahead.
It's actually a question for David.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's your birthday.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a specific day. But how do you think about time, the vantage point?
I So I feel like for me, the dream of the 90s is alive in my world, and it is alive in Resistor, where we actually, if you look at one of the sides of the hexacroller sphere, I don't know if y'all can see it. Yeah, these are Swatch Internet beats. Like we are the last holdout of the Swatch Internet time standard. You know, we're like,
It's good that somebody's keeping it alive and not somebody who lives in Switzerland.
yeah, exactly. The Swiss, of course, have a long tradition of their own timekeeping, and I don't think they can really just shake that off, but we're a little bit more experimenting here in New York City, I'd say. Cool. Any other questions from the audience?
Do they want our old pebbles that don't turn on anymore?
Do you want old pebbles that don't turn on anymore,
But have the charging cables.
but have the charging cables for? Oh, looks like you have some maybe already.
Get them to the West Coast cheaply, sure. They're kind of a pain in the ass to open up and replace the batteries, but you almost can on some of them.
Cool.
But yeah, I don't know. Put that person in contact with us, I guess.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Well,
Thanks,
happy
guys.
birthday, David.
There's just one more question or comment.
Yeah, they've had open lamp and open clock where you can bring lamps for clocks.
Oh, okay, yeah. We've had like kind of interesting clock hacky things in the past year, so it's just a shout out to Resistor for that.
And what was the name of that project? I didn't catch it over the mic.
I think it was just called like Hack Clocks. The thing is, like, our website, like, integrations are like all broken. Also, speaking of time, we're gonna run out of we have 5 minutes left before like the Zoom trial runs out. Speaking of capitalism.
Yeah, love it.
But yeah, basically we've had on our Instagram, I guess, events where we talk about hacking lamps, hacking clocks, other kind of like industrial appliances and things like that. So yeah, we also just have a lot of like nonsense clocks. Like I'll also like point you this way to like the like glowing like thing underneath Debo, like that is like a troll clock. You can only watch it if you're not colorblind. Um so we have like others, we have binary clocks around. Some of them still work, I guess. So yeah, Resistor is definitely the place for this, I would say. So next time you're over here, you should come, do some clock hacking, I think, or time hacking.
I've got some like stuff like LED stuff on all right.
Yeah, we have one more question here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about seasonality a lot too, and time scales. And I'm kind of curious how you're thinking about incorporating how does seasonality fit into this idea of scale of time? And then what happens if you're in a place that doesn't have seasonality?
Like Phoenix.
The question was, to David's point, what do you do in a place that doesn't have seasonality? Am I correct? And
second
I
part of the
think,
question, but how do you think about seasonality? Does it change scale of time? Your day is shorter, your night longer. Like, how do you think about time scale in your firmware?
do you have a?
Yeah, so I mean, we were debating one of the if you look at the original video of that project, it was just time to eat, time to work, time to harvest, and that's basically your calendar. And we were debating in our chat room what would like a non-prescriptivist, non-capitalist, non-industrialist timekeeping look like. And Ryan said, I would have a watch that didn't tell me what to do, right? Maybe you have some flexibility in your time scales. Maybe it is time to go to work, but maybe you fit 5 minutes of watering your plants in before you leave. So we wanted a watch that would include that. And that's why we had that kind of 2D array where maybe things are scrolling off to the side of like a medium term goal of yours. Or one of our other friends said, didn't you know that we're going from reading Shakespearean novel season to like Eldritch horror season, or like there's different seasons for all of us. We picked the Japanese small seasons because there's a convenient database of them with convenient times. But I think it's really actually a personal thing. Yeah. And I would love for this kind of watch, if it was developed into something that anybody could download and use, to have numerous data sources telling you, this is your season for paying attention to small domestic animals or reconnecting with family or whatever. And maybe some of that is based on the natural season, but maybe some of it is our traditions as well.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. You showed earlier like a picture of those Casio watches being hacked. There's like a whole community of people around the Casio watch. Is that spurred because of like 9/11? Because the terrorists used that Casio watch, and a lot of people started buying the Casio watch to kind of prevent rape. There was a lot of
It was racial profiling based on the watch, basically. And so people were basically wearing the watch to kind of like add noise to the
I'm
cloud.
wondering if
Yeah, I was reading as I was reading, and you noticed I used one of the images of one of the more infamous F91W hacks, but that profiling was very interesting. I noticed because at the end of the day, it's just a watch, right? Like you open it up, it's got a circuit board. You can take the circuit board and you can do whatever the heck you want with it. If the circuit board's gonna like run an electric circuit over something, it's gonna do that. And we're like almost out of time. So I love you all. Happy birthday, David.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. This has been a really good talk.